Emil Cadlick here with FantasyNation.com. We have a special fantasy sports pioneer, Peter Schoenke, who co-founded and is the president of RotoWire.com. He's also the chairman of the Fantasy Sports Gaming Association and has been for quite a while. He's got two Hall of Fames, the Fantasy Sports Gaming Association, or whatever we call it now, and the Writers Association. So let's hear it from Peter Schoenke. How you doing, Peter?
It's great to be here. It's great to hear that list. Unfortunately, that just means I'm getting a little bit older. So
You just what?
it just means I'm getting old.
You don't look old, that's for sure. So, in your childhood or whatnot, were you into sports?
Oh yeah, I mean, pretty much from as far as I can remember. I think I got my first football card or baseball card when I was like 5 or 6, and watched the World Series when I was 7, 8, 9. I still remember all those moments. So, I was always a huge sports fan. When I played wiffle ball with my friends growing up, I actually kept the stats. I could still tell you my career wiffle ball batting average.
Wow.
I was out there keeping all the stats, and when I first got a computer in the it was about late 80s. I put it all in a spreadsheet and kept track of it that way. So I was always kind of a uber sports geek, even just from day one. So.
When did you discover fantasy sports?
I actually read about fantasy sports in the 80s while I was in high school. I actually got the rotisserie book, the book that was from the founders, and on the shelves. But back then, I just couldn't get anyone to play with me. So we had there was another friend I had in high school. We wanted to create a league, and we couldn't get there 6, 8 guys or girls or whatever to be in our league. So it was a real challenge. So it wasn't until my freshman year of college in 1990 that I was able to get 8 friends together to form a fantasy baseball league. In the 8th one, I literally had to physically drag in the draft room in order to be in the league. And that was the first league that I joined, that I was in, and I was the commissioner, and I did all the stats by hand. And that league actually still goes to this day. We just had our 30th annual draft a couple weeks ago for baseball. And it includes Herb Wilk and Jeff Erickson, my 2 co-founders of Roto Wire. So that's kind of remarkable.
Yeah. Now, were those drafts, and are they still auction-based for baseball?
Yeah, so that was baseball. It was auction. It was 4x4. It was American League only. And we did football the same year. We added football that fall. We did football. And the football league has, over the years, we've added new rules and, PPR, and added more teams and all kinds of things like that to try to modernize it. But baseball, for whatever reason, we've always just kept the same. So it's the same old, AL only, 4x4 league. Although we added the Brewers, so it's the AL plus Brewers, and we like to say that we didn't add the Brewers were taken away from us, right? So because they switched leagues back in the 90s, so we still have the Brewers for the couple guys that still are Brewers fans. But it's a pretty fun league, and to me, it's like stories about leagues like that are really the core of fantasy sports. I mean, it's just a way to have fun with your friends, stay in touch. The continuity year to year is a great time. And I know fantasy sports has evolved from there to, season-long leagues and basketball leagues and daily fantasy sports. But, I still feel like at its core, it's still, that league is kind of the core of fantasy sports where it all came from. There's lots of similar leagues like that.
Oh, yeah, it's been going on since the late 50s. It's been going on.
Well, I mean, really, there's evidence. If you really go back, there's really since the dawn of statistics, there's somebody that tried to create a, simulation fantasy league, whatever. It wasn't until, it really wasn't until the 80s when somebody wrote a book about it and prophesized about it that it became mass. And I know that there's the, Gospel League back in the 60s, and there's, some high-profile leagues, and they certainly deserve a lot of credit. And their method, kind of spun out, but it just didn't hit the broader masses until you had a bunch of sports writers in the 80s, writing about it. That's what really, gave it its critical mass. So,
Yeah,
if you go back, I've done a lot of research, as you have, on the history of fantasy sports, and it's like every time you think that you figured out, oh yeah, this is the earliest league, or wow, this always something new that's back there. People have been trying to do it forever.
Speaking of that, the guy who created Wilfred Wingenbach, since you mentioned it, did the Goppel in 63. August 63 was the first draft. He did the Superior Tile Summer Invitational Home Run Tournament league, and it started around 59 or 60. And he even did golf in that time frame too, in the late 50s. And I did some research years ago. I was tinkering on newspaperarchive.org, or one of the newspaper sites, and I found articles about the baseball league in the mid 60s in newspapers.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talked about people writing about it, they were actually writing about the Goppel and the Fantasy Sports Superior Tile Baseball League even back in the 60s. I lost it on my computer. I may have to. That darn subscription costs like $70 for 6 months, so I need to go back and do some more investigation. But anyway,
yeah,
we babble about that.
Every time you look back, there's somebody who's always been trying to do it. But yeah, obviously in the 80s, that's when it really hit the mainstream. That's when I first read about it.
Yeah.
And, I'm aware of it. But, I think people today people don't realize how hard it was just to form a league back then, right? I mean, you had to find, 6, 8, 10 people that were interested in it and would actually be willing to do the research just to figure out who the players were on everyone's team. It wasn't so accessible that you could go on the internet and figure out who the backup running back was and even the starting lineups. So it took some work. And so, nowadays that's, the internet and the information, that's just incredibly easy. Back then it was even though I wanted to play fantasy sports in high school, I couldn't do it.
That's interesting. Well, the technology also helped. The commission, you had to find a commissioner too who wanted to spend the time to do it by hand. So that technology really helped, explode, the whole industry.
Yeah, and we were one of the first guys that did that in the late 90s, and and built the first ever free commissioner service. And really for a long time, from 1998 to 2001, had probably the biggest commissioner service in the world. And largely that was just motivated by the fact that, we were sick of doing it by hand and wanted to run our leagues our own way and, do it our own system and, hope that everybody else would sort of think that was pretty cool. And, and luckily at the time people did.
So in 97, it says you started the company?
Yeah, so in 96, two friends of mine, Jeff Erickson, Herbill, myself, we were, hanging out at the bars in Chicago, and the internet was getting going. Yahoo had just gone public, and we were like, wow, let's form an internet business. Let's think of something that can really, take off here. And we had a bunch of different ideas, all of which were, dumb, or we would do some research and figure out that somebody else did it. And eventually, I just said, well, I got an idea. Why don't we just do for fantasy sports what my day job is? At the time, I was a financial markets reporter, so I worked for Dow Jones. I think they used to be called Dow Jones Capital Markets Report, which now is Dow Jones Newswires. And I used to cover the futures and options markets in Chicago. So, the price of, futures for, bonds, your dollars would go up or down. I'd write reports figuring out why they went up or down. And at the time when there was no internet, before the internet really took off, all these traders would go to the floor and they would go to a Bloomberg terminal or Dow Jones terminal, and you'd type in a stock index, stock number or security number, and it'd pull back like graph and, latest headlines. And that was revolutionary. I mean, now it's really common, right? I mean, obviously it's everywhere. At the time I thought, well, let's do that for fantasy sports, and how much work is this going to be? We already spend, 10 hours a week on fantasy sports anyway. And that's how we sort of came up with the whole concept. The thing that we thought of was player news, where, you could, we'd have little blurbs on every player, have our news and the analysis. You could have a searchable database where that way you could go in and quickly find out what's going on with the player. And that was fairly revolutionary. So when we launched the site, it was called Roto News at the time. It really just kind of took off from there. People loved it, and our traffic grew so quickly that at one point within the first 2 years, we're actually the 7th biggest sports website in the U.S.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different era though. It sounds really good, and it is fun, and we don't take a lot of credit for it. But at the same time, it was an era when websites like, some of the leagues didn't even have websites, and there weren't a lot of major media companies. And ESPN was ESPNnet.zone or whatever it was back then. I mean, it was like, so it was just a different era. But people quickly found us, and we became very popular overnight, and so that was a lot of fun.
Can you see the screen right now?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So that's awesome. That's Roto Wire at about 2000. I don't know, 2001. So we started Roto News. We sold it to a company in 1999 that was going to .com that was going to go public, make us millionaires. And unfortunately, they really spent all their money on a bunch of dumb stuff, like a typical .com at the time, and they actually went bankrupt in 2001. And so we had worked for them. We were working for them. When they went bankrupt, they refused to sell the name back to me. And so we decided to just keep the business going, had everything, and, just change the name, and all our customers found us. And eventually we did find us. You can still find us at rotonews.com. Eventually I got the name back. But that was it. That was like probably the first edition of Roto Wire as opposed to Roto News. So,
yeah, that was 2001 off the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
Who was the company? Who was the company that you were working for?
Failed startup called Broadband Sports. So
say it again.
Broadband Sports. That's the
really?
company that bought it.
I vaguely remember that.
And at the time, they were going to do official athlete websites and some other sports stuff that really didn't pan out or have much merit. But unfortunately, it was also difficult at the time. .com startup that spent a lot of money on stuff to make them look good, not really fundamental in the business, and went bankrupt. But it was a good learning experience for us. I mean, one of the things that we did after that was when we came back in 2001, we had to figure out how to make some money on it. And so we went from all free, which at the time was, just kind of the way everything on the internet worked. And we were trying to generate lots of traffic and figure out how to make money. And in 2001, when that didn't really work, we just decided to make it pay. So we became a paid subscription service, and it worked out remarkably well. I mean, it's just, people actually will pay for good content. It's almost 20 years we've been doing paid system, and it's worked. And the revenue is there. You can forecast it, and 15, 20 years later, everyone kind of came around to our line of thinking, as you've seen, all your local papers and go to pay subscription more and more. You've seen sites like The Athletic, and so it's a good model, and I feel like we are way ahead of our time. And fantasy sports is a little bit easier to do because it's a very niche market, and people want to pay for information that will help them, win their leagues or do better. So it's a little bit easier, but still, it's definitely it was a good model for us, and I think it continues to be good.
So it says you were the inventor of Player News.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, there was definitely some other stuff, but we were really the guys that were the first people that did Player News in a searchable database with the Player News and analysis that really is the format that moves on.
When did you start that?
That was 97. We pretty much launched that from the day of the website. So
okay, cool.
And
which was Roto News at the time in 97.
Yeah, exactly. And there's definitely been some competitors, and there's some other companies that have come along and done it and done a great job. And so just the fact that the format that we invented still lives on, it's kind of remarkable. Cool. Everybody does it the same way, and that was us. And there were some other websites that were around that era that came later that did some stuff that had little news and notes on players and injuries, but they didn't quite do it in that format, and that's become the dominant format. And that's kind of one fun thing to see is like something we came up with. Even if we're not going to be even if we're not the guys that monopolize it or whatever, there's competition. The fact that we sort of came up with the format that goes on is definitely fun.
That's pretty good. So tell me more about the commissioner. How did you quickly develop a commissioner that quickly in like a year?
We had another friend who was a programmer and helped us out, and we had the idea. We built it. We learned a lot, and at the time there were a couple of in the late 80s, early 90s, there were a number of services that you could purchase that were by fax, and that was like when I first got a job out of college and didn't have as much time to type in stats every week. Signing up for one of those services was just a godsend, right? I mean, now you could get like this fax every week. And then in the mid 90s, a lot of those services, moved to the web. And about 95, 96, I forget exactly the chronology, but there's definitely some, a number of those services moved to the web. But in 98, sorry, we saw how the market was working, and we thought, wow, this is a thing that you could really offer a free product for and get a lot of traffic for, and then you'd also have you probably lock them in because there's a high switching cost to commissioner service. You get used to their interface, you've got their data, so you can really have them for a long time. So we were the first ones that did that, and we had a huge market share. We probably had 60 to 70% of all of the fantasy sports leagues in the U.S. On Roto News.
Do you still have that commissioner product? Or?
No. So then what happened was when the company that bought us went bankrupt, they didn't pay for the stats anymore. There was a period where we basically failed our consumers. Not us, but the company. And so during that period when we sort of failed, that failed like NBA and NHL right off the start of baseball. We came back after the start of baseball. And similarly, at the same time, that year, both Yahoo and CBS went free. Their products, which had been paid products before, and in Yahoo's case, I think hadn't even been a product, or it had been like a very limited product. And they both made big efforts to have free commissioner services. And so we decided at that point just to sort of get out of the game and just focus on the news. And then a few years later, because we wanted our own baseball league, we went our own way. We bought it back. So the baseball service we still have. We can still have the data. The rotisserie baseball service on Roto Wire. You can run your league. We charge for it now. We realize that it probably is a better way, especially for a smaller service that caters more towards niche players. That's what we do. Currently on Roto Wire, if you want to use our commissioner service, it's a good product. But it's really more catered to people that really want to be empowered as opposed to people that just kind of run like your average 5x5 league. And there's a lot of good products out there. ESPN and Yahoo and CBS continue to improve every year, and they've got great products. But we've got just a few things that it's not really economical for them to have in their leagues, and people are just used to our interface. So we still have the product, but yeah, it's really it's kind of a relic of the past. But there was a time when we had a huge product, a ton of people, and a huge opportunity to make a lot of money on it, and it just it didn't happen for a variety of reasons, which is disappointing. But it was a wild ride. But all things considered, we ended up doing just fine.
Yeah, you're doing great. So tell me when you got involved in the Fantasy Sports Trade Association.
I've been in that pretty much since the inception. 98, 99, there were a bunch of industry meetings. It really first oriented around the labor drafts, which is USA Today's league, Baseball Extra League. I forget the acronym is League of Alternative Baseball Reality. And so that was really like the first industry meetings. There were a couple. You'd go to Florida, and do those expert drafts. And then at the time, people were like, we should get together and form an industry association. So pretty much from the inception, I was involved in that and on the board. And early days, Greg Ambrosius was the head of it, and he did just a tremendous job, not only running the association, but also just getting the industry together to talk to each other and sort through issues and figure things out. And he had his conferences every year. Then he had for his company, they had a trading card conference, and he had a trading card magazine in addition to his own fantasy sports magazine. And every year for that conference, they would sort of turn that into a little on the side kind of fantasy sports industry conference. And so we kind of piggybacked off that in the early days from the FSTA, and it just kind of grew from there. So, in the early days, it was fun to get together and you meet 20 or 30 other people, and it'd be like, wow, you like fantasy sports? Wow, you're trying to make money off this? Great. Well, what problems are you whaving? Like, where do you get stats from? How do you find customers? Are the leagues charging you for the use of the player names? All that kind of stuff. It was just, it's just a godsend to meet everyone and be able to talk business with somebody that knew what you were talking about. And the people in the fantasy sports industry, especially the fantasy baseball industry at that time, they're just all really nice people. They're all in it because they love fantasy sports. And so lots of times you meet competitors. I remember Mike Chandler, for example. I was really intimidated. He was the biggest online sites that he just launched. He had a book, and a magazine, and that was really popular. And I was like, oh man, this guy, I think competitor, he's probably fearful of me. He's trying to be a jerk. Who knows? And nice guy. It was great. Just baseball with him, and about fantasy sports and the industry, and just about everybody else in the industry. That pretty much everybody in that industry at that time was like that. You know, you meet Greg Ambrosius or Rick Wolf or any of the early founders of the fantasy sports businesses, and it was just it was fun. You know, we all loved sports, we all loved fantasy, we loved drafting and playing against each other, and I think that really helped the industry. You know, I think if we'd all been cutthroat entrepreneurs, didn't want to talk to each other and help each other out, I don't think the industry would have really grown as quickly as it did.
Yeah, those are great times. Did you go to the Fantasy Insights Fantasy Sports Convention in the Tropicana in 1998?
Yeah, I was there for that one. So that was the summer of, I want to say that was the summer of '98.
Yes.
And that was another one. That was another big one. I mean, the baseball labor drafts have been going on, and so those were first, and then that was really kind of the first football only one. And that was a great convention as well. I remember that we went to that convention. It was in Vegas, and nobody attended. I mean, there were like, you know, very few people there. But it was the first time that the football industry had gotten together, and so meeting Joe Bryant and you know, a number of other people in the fantasy sports business, fantasy football business in particular, was just very beneficial. Same thing, you know, it was like meeting all the people of that industry again was just a revelation, you know, in terms of talking football, doing drafts, and figuring out how to all, you know, how we all make money together. And that was a pretty instrumental meeting as well. Even though I think whoever organized and ran that thing probably lost a lot of money because there were a lot of consumers there.
Well, it was interesting too, because when talking to a few people about it, and I was there too, and they said we all went in a meeting, and I hardly remember it, where we kind of talked business to business, and that helped create the FSTA, because I think it was the next year of the FSTA, and some people say in that room we actually said, hey, this really worked, and then they started creating the FSTA. I don't really remember that well. That's 22 years ago.
It's all of the above. It's all fog until really kind of Greg Ambrosius, you know, sort of, you know, I mean, he sort of took it over and really made it into what it was in my day.
Yeah.
And he does a ton of credit. I think there were a couple of meetings, either that one or the other one, where something was going to happen. But really, once Greg kind of took over the association and got it going with regular meetings and tying into his conferences, you know, really, that's when it really took off. And, you know, like I said, I give him just a ton of credit for the growth of the industry.
So you also, and the trade association, you're the chairman right now. You've been in there for how long? Have you been working with the trade association? Like since the beginning, as far as on the board?
Since the beginning, you know, I've been on the board since like the beginning, and I've been the chairman since 2009. So yeah.
Hey, who's going to be the president now? Have we decided yet? I don't know if the vote's complete or anything.
Breaking news here. Yesterday we had an election. Stacey Stern is the new president.
Well, how do you like that? That's great. So you want to be the president?
And before that, you know, ran a Head-to-Head Sports, which is, people don't know, is a season-long contest operator. It's still out there today. It's a fun game. And so she's a great person for the job. You know, knows the DFS side, knows the sports betting side, knows the season-long, you know, smaller companies, has been in the legislative hearings and, you know, all those kinds of things to help protect the industry and pass laws, has been, you know, dealing with customers on the phone, you know, why are my stats loading, you know, how can I get a refund? So it really couldn't be a better person in the industry right now. And obviously we're, you know, transitioning from just fantasy sports to fantasy sports plus sports betting. And so that's really that's the challenge going forward, is how to maximize this opportunity for everybody like us who's been in the industry for a long time. How do we you know, wed the two to make money and offer great user experiences? And so she's a perfect person for that.
Great. Now you also were heavily involved in helping with the regulation in the many states, and you also testified in Congress. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So you know, I've been the chairman since 2009. And a few years after being the chairman, you know, we sort of had a couple of legal issues come up from a, you know, legislative and law standpoint. And so in 2011, a legislator in Maryland, there was a person in Maryland who won a contest, and it wasn't clear if they could collect their money from a fantasy sports contest. And so a legislator in Maryland said, well, let's pass a law and make it clear that you can. And so we, as the FSTA got in touch with him and heard about it and decided to support him and, and helped pass that law in 2011. And then we started doing the same thing in other states. We did in Kansas. And then, daily fantasy sports around that time, or a little bit thereafter, really took off. The first FanDuel was on 2009, but probably really didn't, get to be very prominent until 2011, 2012. And of course, DFS just took off like a rocket ship. And, that attracted a ton of attention from legislators and lawmakers and attorney generals who suddenly thought that it was an end around for, gambling, to get for sports betting. Didn't really know what fantasy sports was. And so when FanDuel and DraftKings spent, $500 million in advertising in 2015, that was just, created just a huge public event where in my opinion, all these legislators, all the advertising gave them a forum to instantly, go on TV and use that spotlight to, to shout out their own message and get attention. Most so with the New York Attorney General, who decided to go after FanDuel and DraftKings as illegal sports betting. And it was making rounds on the morning TV shows every morning, making to get a lot of publicity out of it. And so that really became a battle for the industry to try to really save paid fantasy sports and paid DFS. And not that I'm like some super experienced government affairs person, but I was the most experienced and only person at the time in 2015. So, I helped lead the effort to try to hire lobbyists and, testified in hearings in New York and California and eventually 12 states. And, when there was a congressional hearing on the subject, which to this day still seems crazy that there was an actual congressional hearing on fantasy sports. I went to that and represented the fantasy sports industry and got grilled about daily fantasy sports. So, luckily, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely, there were fun aspects to it. It was interesting learning the ins and outs of governments and how laws are passed and attorney general nuances. What is an opinion versus a formal opinion versus just a statement they made. There's all kinds of wrinkles that I never knew existed. But we kind of won the war. But the battle still kind of goes on. I mean, New York recently. There's a court case that's going through the ranks whether the legislature had the power to declare, daily fantasy sports and paid fantasy sports a game of skill and not gambling. Hopefully we'll win that. It's probably going to go to the highest court in New York, the Supreme Court they call everywhere else, but in New York they've got a different name. And there's states, where we're still trying to pass laws to clarify that fantasy sports are legal games of skill, like Louisiana, and some other ones where the laws are not acceptable for paid fantasy sports. Iowa, the law got passed there last year to make it so that paid fantasy sports and daily fantasy sports can be played in the state. That was a state that wasn't conducive for it before. So the battle kind of goes on, but the larger war, we largely won. That daily fantasy sports are paid, are games of skill and should be legal and separate from sports betting. And then, of course, while we were doing all that, then there was the passport ruling, which made it so that sports betting is legal in the U.S., or at least gives every state the ability to declare it to be legal and set up rules and regulations. And obviously, that's the next big thing. And now we're almost 20 states that have done that. And so, it just keeps moving, I guess.
Yeah, that's incredible. All that time. That was crazy. This is a history, although this coronavirus is, causing a lot of issues, and I don't mean to be downplaying it as far as people, but how do you think it's going to affect this Major League Baseball season coming up and the fantasy companies?
It's interesting. I mean, we've had a couple of things like this in the past. I mean, certainly not from the coronavirus aspect and the sort of national health aspect, which is like the most important, and I don't mean to belittle that at all. But we've certainly had some interruptions in sports, which have impacted fantasy sports. So there was the player strike from baseball in the mid-'90s, which ended the season, and a lot of the business back then had a hard time, and they figured out ways to sort of generate fake stats. And there's been lockouts. We missed a whole hockey season one time. There was the threat of the NFL lockout earlier last decade, 10 years ago. which and just the threat of a lockout or a work stoppage is damaging for our industry because it's really hard to raise investment money or sell advertising or make any plans ahead of time when there's not potentially going to be a season. This is a little bit different, I think. I think there will be a baseball season. I don't know if it's going to start on April 15th, May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, but I think there will be a baseball season. And if there's fantasy baseball, I think people will play fantasy baseball, so there will be a fantasy baseball season. So a company like mine will survive. There might not be daily fantasy sports contests for a while, but I think we'll get through it. I think that people knowing that it's going to come back at some point will keep them going and engaged and ready to go when it starts. I think it'd be a little bit different if it was like a strike or something like that, where the season just might be over. I think basketball and hockey, since they're played indoors, they have the ability to finish their season or have playoffs, even if it gets kind of strung out. There's no reason you couldn't play the NBA Finals in August or September. It might alter next year's schedule, and they might have to cut off the regular season or something like that, but they could do it. Even baseball, they could have a season that started in June or July and finished in November or December. They just might have to have a playoff system that's in a neutral park in warm weather or dome stadiums. And, that would be a little odd, but it's totally doable. I just feel bad for the college kids and the high school kids whose, tournaments and postseasons have been canceled because, they only get one shot at it and you can't postpone it for a lot of logistical reasons. And, they're not going to be in school forever. So, I feel bad for them. But I think the pro leagues will happen. I think fantasy sports will survive. We'll see. But you know what? If we're talking on August 1st or September 1st and we're still in the same boat here, then it might be a whole different story. But if things get up and running
again,
again,
affect the football season too, the NFL season.
Yeah, I think for the industry, there's no doubt that fantasy sports, the industry, NFL football is by far the biggest product. And as long as NFL football runs on time, on schedule, and fantasy drafts and everything happen, the industry at large, will be fine. That's the one that will be the bigger hit. And I think, like I said, baseball, I think will happen, and there will be fantasy around it, and so it's not going to be like a total loss for the industry and for the fans. Whether you get 100, 150 or 160 games, I'm not sure, but I think that if the situation stretches into the summer and into the fall, then I think fantasy sports industry and the sports industry at large, will have a really hard time. I think, of course, bigger society would have a tremendously bigger time, as we'd probably have a lot bigger fish to fry. But I think, if everything, assuming, baseball starts Memorial Day, we'll have a season, we'll have fantasy sports, we'll have daily fantasy sports. I think we'll get back to having fun again. Companies like mine will start making money again. But it's definitely interesting times.
Yeah, it is. Anything else you'd like to bring up about your career?
No, just it's been fun. At the end of the day, it's back when we started in 1997, it was all about the excitement over somebody gets traded and somebody gets called up, and some NFL team signs somebody, or there's a new quarterback that's going to start, and that's it's fun to write the player down for it. It's fun to rework the projection. It's fun to play the games. All the games that come along, daily fantasy sports, best ball, all those things, categories. It's just been a lot of fun, and time's flown by pretty quickly because, like I said, just when you have fun doing this stuff, it's a blast, and hopefully the sports will start up again, and we'll be able to figure it out. And 10 years from now, we'll come up with crazy innovations that people have come up with sports betting, plus fantasy sports, plus new technology, and I'm pretty excited. It's fun to be in the industry.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, you're truly a pioneer of fantasy sports, and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Hey, thanks for the time. It's fun talking. Hopefully somebody finds it interesting.
I hope so. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.